Hey guys, tonight we step off the cold, muddy road and into the rickety wooden doorway of a place that smells like old dreams and cheap beer. That's right, you're visiting a medieval tavern. You're cold, tired, and just a little bit desperate. And the moment you step inside, you realise something. You probably won't survive this. Not without catching fleas, offending a bard, or losing a tooth in a dice game. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when people are listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here. Outside, the chill clings to your bones and your boots squelch from some combination of rain and something you hope was just rain. But now you push open the splintered door and step into the stuffy warmth of the tavern. The first thing that hits you? The heat. Not a cosy fireplace kind of warmth, but the oppressive body heat of 30 unwashed strangers and 2 badly trained dogs crammed together in one smoky room. The light flickers. It's not from electricity, of course. This is the 1300S. The room glows a kind of orange gold from tallow candles stuck into blackened iron wall hooks. A hearth roars on one side, spitting sparks onto a floor layered with still and last week's spilled stew. Somewhere in the corner, someone coughs like they're dying. Honestly, they might be. There's no music playing yet, just the dull roar of voices, deep, slurry, impatient. Tankards slam onto tables, someone laughs too loudly, someone else mumbles a prayer over their drink. You're not entirely sure if that's a toast or an exorcism. And you stand there, blinking in the gloom, unsure what to do next. Everyone here seems to have a purpose. A place. A reason. You, meanwhile, look like someone who's about to ask for a gluten-free menu and get thrown into the pig trough. Let's start with the layout. This tavern isn't large, but it feels alive, like a breathing, belching animal. The wooden beams overhead are black with soot. A few decorative herbs dangle from the ceiling. Sage, maybe, supposed to ward off illness, or at least mask the scent of whatever died under the floorboards. The tables are mismatched and crooked. The chairs are worse. One stool is literally just a tree stump with legs nailed on. A bar, or what counts for one, is a wide plank balanced atop 2 barrels. Behind it stands the tavern keeper, thick arms, thicker beard, and eyes that don't miss a thing. He's wiping a mug with something that might once have been a rag, but now looks like it's absorbed more grease than a fryer. First time? He grunts without looking up. You nod. Maybe you shouldn't have. There's a hierarchy in here, though it's not written on the wall. Closest to the fire sits the merchant, slug, red-nosed, counting coins. Next to him, a few men with travelling cloaks, maybe pilgrims. They sit slowly, eyes scanning the room. Against a back wall, that's where things get darker. A card game. Low voices. One man's hand never leaves the hilt of his dagger. You make a mental note not to walk in that direction unless you're looking to lose a kidney. You shuffle forward. The floor gives a worrying creak under your foot. A chicken clucks and runs past you. Wait, was that a chicken? You glance around. Yep, there it is, pecking at a puddle that may or may not be ale. That puddle, by the way, is a fine example of medieval cleanliness. People in the Middle Ages didn't have modern sanitation, and taverns were the definition of rustic. Floors were rarely cleaned. Instead, they were covered in straw to absorb spills. And worse. In fact, one English ordinance from the 14th century specifically told tavern owners to lay down fresh rushes, lest the stench offend guests. So yes, your boots are now part of that grand historical tradition. You're nudged from behind by someone trying to get through. He smells like onions and wood smoke. You stumble forward, land awkwardly at a long communal table, and realise this is your seat now. You sit. And for a moment, you just listen. The man next to you mutters in French. Across from you, a woman with wild hair is feeding something. Maybe a ferret? From her own mug. 2 seats down, a teenager is carving his name into the table. Badly. It's spelt wrong, but nobody corrects him. Nobody wants that fight. This place is loud, messy, chaotic, and alive. It's where deals are made, arguments are born, and love stories that definitely shouldn't happen get written in spilled wine. Oh, and the wine? Not great. In fact, most of the alcohol served in medieval taverns was either ale or small beer, a very weak beer brewed for everyday drinking, even by children. It was safer than water, which was often contaminated, and gave just enough buzz to make you forget your lice. Some scholars argue that the distinction between inn, alehouse and tavern was more about licensing and taxes than anything else. Inns offered lodging, alehouses served only ale, taverns served wine, but in practice, especially in rural areas, the lines blurred. This place? Definitely a hybrid, probably unlicensed, almost certainly illegal, but hey, the ale is flowing, the stew smells less awful now, and the guy next to you just broke into song. A deeply off-key song about a goose named Margaret. Here's a fringe fact for you. Some taverns were built inside of churches. Yes, actual churches. In fact, in medieval London, several parishes were fined for letting ale be sold on the premises. Apparently, divine judgment wasn't enough to stop a solid pint. And historians still debate whether women were fully welcome in these spaces. Some believe women only came to taverns if they were serving drinks or themselves. But archaeological finds, like combs and hairpins in tavern waste pits, suggest that women were more present than written records admit. So the lady with the ferret? She might be more of a regular than anyone here. Back to you. The tavern keeper slides a mug your way. You didn't ask for it, but here it is. Lukewarm, foamy, and smelling like week-old bread and regret. You sip. It's bitter, sour, but you don't hate it. In the corner, a fire cracks. Someone throws on a log, and the sparks dance like fireflies before vanishing into the blackened chimney. A dog curls up under your table. The sounds blend. Conversation, drinking, the occasional hiccup. It's strangely comforting. And just when you're starting to feel relaxed, wham, the door bursts open. Rain whips in, everyone looks. A man stumbles through, hooded, muddy, eyes wild. He slams the door, leans against it, and mutters something about bandits near the road. The tavern goes quiet. A moment of tension. Then, someone raises a cup and toasts to more bandits and fewer taxes. The place erupts in laughter, and just like that, the moment's... You sit back, mug in hand, heart still thudding, and think to yourself, what is this place? Welcome to the medieval tavern. You're going to remember this night for a long, long time. The tavern door thuds closed behind the man who warned of bandits, and like a heavy curtain falling on a stage, the atmosphere settles again into its familiar rhythm. But now you notice it more. The rhythm isn't just sound, it's scent, and oh, what a scent it is. You shift slightly on your creaky stool, trying to find a position where the seat doesn't jab you in an extremely personal location. And that's when it hits you. The smell. Not a single smell, mind you, but an orchestra of aromas, most of which you wish had stayed silent. There's the pungent staleness of spilled ale soaked deep into the wooden table. A sour twinge of unwashed feet wafts from beneath, thanks to the man next to you who's kicked off his boots with the kind of confidence that only someone utterly nose-blind could possess. There's also an unmistakable whiff of wet dog. 2 wet dogs, actually. One is napping under your bench, the other is gnawing on what looks suspiciously like a human shoe. Your nose twitches. You wrinkle your face, and you begin to suspect that the most dangerous thing in this tavern might not be the daggers or the dice, it might be the air itself. And yes, medieval taverns smelt bad. Really bad. Hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority for most people. Bathing? If you were lucky, maybe once every few weeks. Maybe. And even then it was usually in a reused tub of water that every family member had already sat in like medieval soup dumplings. So the man next to you? The one drinking his ale like it's his last night on Earth? Yeah, he probably hasn't bathed since the last full moon. There's a reason herbs and flowers were hung around rooms, not just for decoration, but as medieval air fresheners. Unfortunately, in this particular tavern, they're mostly dry and crumbling, so they now serve about the same function as hanging up a car freshener from 2007 and hoping it'll solve a sewage leak. As your eyes adjust more to the candlelight, you start to notice finer details. The wooden beams overhead are etched with knife marks, tally scratches, and what you assume are love notes, although one simply reads, "Henry's toes equals gone." You'd like to know that story, and also not know it. At the same time, someone walks by carrying a tray of food. The scent clings to them like a ghost, smoky, meaty, and undeniably burnt. It drifts across your face and seems to lodge in your hair like campfire smoke with something sinister mixed in. That smell will be with you forever. Even after death, your ghost will carry the scent of medieval stew. Your stomach rumbles. You're not even sure if it's hunger or just confusion. Now, here's an actual historical tidbit. Medieval taverns didn't usually cook food themselves. Instead, they partnered with nearby bakers, cooks, or brewers. Food would be brought in from outside vendors, though some larger establishments did have their own kitchens and served hot meals like pottage, stew, or roasted meats. Tonight's offering? Based on the smell, we're probably looking at a barley and onion gruel flavoured with whatever was still moving yesterday. You lean back, trying to take a breath through your mouth. Big mistake, because the air inside is somehow humid, but not the tropical kind, the sweaty, overpopulated kind, a thick mixture of pipe smoke, roasted something, and a strange sour note that makes you think of old cabbage and regret. The man 2 stools down lets out a loud belch that shakes the air around you. Everyone ignores it. You, on the other hand, silently reconsider your decision to time travel here. Let's talk about the ale again. Bum mug sits in front of you, half empty, the foam settling into a crust. Medieval ale was different from what you might know today. For one, hops weren't common in English brewing until the 15th century, and even then some regions resisted. Instead, brewers used a mix of herbs and spices called gruit. The result? A less bitter, earthier flavour, and more chance of weird side effects if the herbs weren't mixed right. Fun fringe fact: some of those herbs included things like heather, bog myrtle, and yarrow, which, if consumed in large quantities, could have psychoactive effects. So if the walls start to ripple, or the dog under the bench starts giving you life advice, don't panic. Just assume the ale had extra yarrow tonight. And here's a scholarly debate. Some historians argue that alcohol consumption in medieval times was dangerously high, with people drinking several litres of ale per day. Others believe the numbers are exaggerated due to record-keeping errors or regional differences. Either way, it's safe to say sobriety wasn't exactly in fashion. You sip your drink cautiously. Still bitter. Still warm. But strangely, it's starting to grow on you. Or maybe you're just adapting. Your body is learning to survive this tavern on a molecular level. Someone strikes a match, or rather sparks flint against steel. The flash briefly lights a face across the room. The man's nose is crooked. His beard is patchy. He looks like someone who's either about to sing or throw a punch. Maybe both. He stands, claps his hands. Who fancies a tune? A few people groan. One person cheers. And before you can protest, he's stomping his foot and launching into a song about a goat that ran away with a monk's pants. It's catchy, it's horrifying, and it somehow involves a fishmonger. The tavern, in a heartbeat, becomes a chorus. Cups are raised, tables are slapped. One of the dogs begins to howl along, perhaps in protest. You don't know the words, but you clap anyway. It feels rude not to. The song ends with a cheer and a crash. Someone fell off their stool. They're fine. Mostly. But let's pause for a second and appreciate this. The tavern isn't just a place to drink. It's a living room, a stage, a confession booth, a town hall. In a time without internet, without phones, without Netflix, this is where people come to feel alive. It's where marriages begin, feuds spark, news spreads, and secrets die. And there's something strangely beautiful about that. A man nearby turns toward you, his eyes bloodshot but friendly. "New, are ye?" he slurs, holding out a hand sticky with ale. You shake it. You regret it, but you shake it. "Name's Cedric," he says. "Used to be a miller. Now I'm a drinker." He laughs at his own joke, which is honestly kind of solid. He leans in conspiratorially. "You smell better than most. Careful?" And just like that, You're part of the room. You're not just a visitor anymore. You're woven into the scent-soaked, laughter-stained fabric of this place. Your hair smells like smoke, your clothes are sticking to your back, and you're pretty sure you're being serenaded by a man with only 3 teeth. But you're here, and strangely, you don't want to leave. The table you're sitting at groans under the weight of elbows, tankards, and one man's head, which has slumped forward into a pile of bread crusts. He lets out a soft snore and doesn't move when someone casually reaches over him to steal what's left of his cheese. Nobody says a word. This, apparently, is just part of the ambient. You're still nursing your mug. If nursing means periodically giving it side-eye while questioning your life choices, when you hear the scrape of a bench behind you, a pair of boots thud to the ground, someone plops down next to you with the kind of force that says, "I live here now." You turn slightly and find yourself staring at a woman with a fraying cap, sharp eyes, and fingers stained from what might be ink or blood. She smells like cloves and something pickled. She slaps a few coins on the table, shouts, "Another!" to no one in particular, and looks at you like she's trying to guess your favourite sin. "So," she says, "what's your story?" You try to answer, but she doesn't wait. She launches into a tale about her cart breaking down outside the town walls, how her last horse died in the middle of a thunderstorm just to be dramatic, and how this tavern is either cursed or blessed, depending on how many drinks you've had. Before long, someone thuds a fresh mug down in front of her. No tray, no receipt. The server vanishes before you can say thank you. And that, dear traveller, is how tavern service worked. No menus, no, "How may I help you?" You ordered by shouting, waving, or making vaguely desperate hand gestures, and the tavern keeper decided if you were worth the effort. It wasn't exactly the Four Season, more like the One Season and It's Always Mud Inn. You reach into your pouch, suddenly remembering you'll need to pay for whatever you're drinking. You pull out a few medieval coins, rough, uneven, hand-hammered discs. Silver pennies, maybe. You hope. The woman beside you snorts when she sees them. "Will you want to bite those?" she says. "Half the coin in this town's clipped or counterfeit. Had a bishop pay me with a coin made of lead once, claimed it was a blessing." You obediently raise one to your teeth and give it a little nibble. It doesn't bend. So far, so good. Here's a bit of history for you. Coin clipping was a real issue. People would shave off the edges of silver coins and melt the scrap to make new ones. It became such a problem in some areas that harsh laws were passed. In England, under King Edward I, Jewish communities were accused en masse of clipping coins, a charge used as a pretext for widespread persecution and executions. A chilling reminder of how economics and prejudice often mix in brutal ways. You slip the coins back into your pouch and notice, not for the first time, just how insecure you feel here. Not unsafe exactly, but on edge. Like the rules don't quite apply. Like someone could steal your boots and sell them back to you 5 minutes later, and somehow convince you they're worth more the second time. A stool screeches across the floor behind you. A new figure sits across the table, tall, hooded, and humming to himself in a low rasp. His fingers drum the wood in a rhythm that makes the woman next to you glance sideways. You're about to say something when a tankard lands in front of you with a splash. A server finally noticed you, or took pity, or maybe they're just guessing who hasn't passed out yet. You nod in thanks. The server nods back, says nothing, and disappears into the crowd. They might have been a teenager, or 50. Hard to tell in this light. Their face looked more like a soot painting than a human expression. You raise the mug, take a slow sip. It's not terrible. Actually, it's almost pleasant. There's a bitterness, but there's also something yeasty and earthy. You can almost taste the grain, a little metallic, probably the mug. You remind yourself not to think too hard about the hygiene situation, or the water source, or the back room where this was probably brewed in a barrel shared with the dishwater. Still, you're drinking like a local now. Welcome to the club. You glance around. The room is alive, glowing with laughter and candlelight. A man at the next table is playing a lute, badly. Another man, possibly his brother based on the identical chin and matching missing teeth, is drumming on a cask. They've got rhythm if not pitch. And somehow people are dancing, not formally, just vaguely moving their arms in a way that says, "I've had 5 ales and this feels like art." The dancing gives you an excuse to look around the room again. It's crowded, yes, but not random. The tables are clustered by invisible borders, farmers near the hearth, traders in the centre, soldiers and wanderers on the fringes. The quiet ones lean against the walls, eyes half closed, always watching. And then you notice the board. It's tacked to one of the beams with what might be a chicken bone. A piece of parchment flaps lightly from it, ink smeared, barely legible. But it reads, "No brawling, no fire, no ghosts." The woman next to you chuckles. There to add the no ghosts part last year. After that travelling friar summoned a spirit in the latrine. You raise an eyebrow. "True story," she insists, and then proceeds to describe how the ghost of a butcher's wife kept moaning about unfinished stew. You think she's joking, until someone at the next table solemnly adds, "She still knocks over the vinegar jugs." So there's that. In medieval taverns, superstition lived side by side with belief. You didn't question it. You simply avoided the haunted stool and tipped extra if the cat crossed your path on the way in. Speaking of cats, you spot one now, black, sleek and darting through the shadows like it owns the place. It probably does. In fact, tavern cats were often valued members of the staff, keeping rats in check and occasionally stealing scraps from inattentive diners. The man with the hood is staring at you now. You shift a little. He raises his mug in a silent toast, and then pulls back his hood, just enough to reveal a lazy grin and an eye patch. "I saw you bite your coin," he says, voice gravelly, wise. "Might be the only coin that leaves this place alive tonight." You blink. He chuckles. "Kidding?" he says. "Mostly." And just like that, he leans back and starts humming again, as if you're not mildly re-evaluating your survival strategy. You push your mug aside, maybe slowly, maybe not noticeably, but definitely further from his reach. Another drink is offered by a passing server. Different mug, different scent. You wave it off. You've had enough for now, and you've still got to figure out how lodging works around here. More on that in a bit. But for now, the fire flickers, laughter swells, and you start to feel like this rickety, beer-stained, cat-haunted place might just grow on you. It's not clean. It's not safe. It's definitely not quiet. But it's real. And in a world where so much is grey stone and cold roads, a warm, noisy tavern where people remember your name, even if just until the next mug, is something worth clinging to. You're starting to get comfortable now. Well, as comfortable as one can get in a place where the benches are uneven, the drinks are mysterious, and the smell of wet wool mixes with body odour like it's been distilled into an essential oil called peasant musk. But your muscles are no longer clenched with suspicion, and your ears have adjusted to the never-ending hum of noise around you, voices rising and falling like waves, the occasional chair scraping the floor, and the constant soft clink of tankards being raised, tapped together, and slammed back down. You glance sideways as a new person drops into the seat beside you. He's tall, broad, and built like someone who routinely carries things heavier than your entire sense of self-worth. His tunic is stained, his hands are scarred, and he smells faintly of garlic and horse. He nods at you, then, "Strong stuff?" he asks, already waving at the tavern keeper to bring 2 more. You shrug. Could be stronger. Could be poison. He laughs, loud and wheezy, and slaps your back like he's trying to knock out your lungs. "That's the spirit. I like you already." He introduces himself as Thomas. No last name. People don't really go in for surnames here unless they're royalty, clergy, or trying to dodge taxes. Thomas leans in, voice low, conspiratorial. "Let me tell you something about this place," he says. "Everyone who comes through here leaves with a story, or a scar. Sometimes both." And just like that, he launches into a tale. It starts with a merchant, a sheep, and a dispute over the authenticity of some allegedly sacred relics, which, spoiler alert, turned out to be the paw of a raccoon. Thomas reenacts the merchant's horror with such theatrical flair that half the table ends up laughing along, even the ones who clearly haven't heard a word of the setup. Tavern tales, you learn, are half truth, half performance, and all alcohol. They're also the glue that holds this strange, transient community together. For every man drinking alone in the corner, there are 5 more at a table, spinning stories so wild you can't tell if they're bragging, confessing, or both. You hear about pirates who escaped capture by dressing as nuns, about witches who cursed entire vineyards out of sheer pettiness, about a miller's wife who convinced the local priest he was the reincarnation of Saint Sebastian just so she could borrow his donkey. And here's the fun part. There's always a nugget of truth in there, a historical kernel buried beneath layers of ale and exaggeration. Here's your mainstream history fact for the section. Taverns were essential nodes in the information network of medieval Europe. With literacy limited and newspapers non-existent, gossip, news and oral storytelling served as the primary method of spreading information. Royal edicts, war updates, weather predictions, and even the latest scandal from a nearby monastery all passed through these ale-soaked lips. And scholars still debate just how influential these stories were in shaping public opinion. Was the average peasant's understanding of politics shaped by official proclamations, or by a drunk named Ulrich swearing he saw the king himself bathing in a river and crying about taxes? The jury's still out. Back to you. You're trying to follow another story, something involving a duck and an abbot, when the mood suddenly shifts. It's subtle at first. Voices drop, chairs squeak as people lean in. Tankards rest quietly on tables instead of slamming down in rhythm. There's a tension in the air now, thin and sharp. You glance toward the doorway. A man has just entered. He's young, clean-shaven, and wearing a cloak a little too fine for this part of town. His eyes are scanning the room the way a hawk watches a rabbit. He says nothing, just steps forward, deliberate and quiet, like he expects the floor to get out of his way. He walks to the bar, whispers something to the tavern keeper and receives a slow nod in return. Then he turns around and disappears into the back room. The moment he vanishes, the tension lifts like a fog burned off by the sun. Laughter resumes. Drinks flow again. People pretend not to notice what just happened, but you can tell. It changed something. You feel it in your gut. Tax collector, Thomas mutters. You blink. Seriously. Or spy, he shrugs. Either way, not someone you want knowing your real name. You look around. No one else seems rattled, but no one's entirely relaxed either. It's like they've all decided to hit pause on certain conversations. Safer that way. You sip your drink. You pretend you don't feel watched. But then, just as suddenly as the tension came, it evaporates. A voice bursts out in song from the corner. Not the same song as before. This one is slower, sadder, about a sailor lost at sea and a widow who married his brother. The room hushes. Even the drunk snoring in the bread seems to stir. The singer is a woman, her voice raw, but steady. Not beautiful in the opera sense, but real, honest, like a knife wrapped in linen. You watch as she closes her eyes and leans into the music, her voice pulling at some invisible thread that runs through the heart of the room. When she finishes, there's no applause, just silence. The good kind. The kind that says everyone felt that, whether they'll admit it or not. And then the tavern erupts again. Cheers, laughter, someone shouts for another round. The woman bows slightly, takes a drink, and disappears back into the shadows. You want to thank her, or ask her name. But she's gone now, swallowed by the room. There's a pause in the energy around your table. You shift your weight, about to speak, when someone thumps their fist down and yells, "Dice." Heads turn. A man in a greasy tunic slaps a small leather cup onto the table. A few others cheer. A small pile of coins appears like magic. Some silver, some not. You recognize a bent token that might actually be part of a broken spoon. Games in taverns were half recreation, half survival strategy. Dice games, card games, riddles, and even crude board games made from scratched wood or pebbles. Gambling was technically frowned upon, sometimes even outlawed. but enforcement was about as consistent as the ale quality. In short, if the sheriff wasn't watching, the dice were flying. Thomas nudges you. Care to lose your dignity and your supper money? You shake your head with a smirk. I'm good at losing things, not so good at winning. Perfect, he says. You'll fit right in. You don't play tonight, but you watch, and you learn. The language of bluffs and groans, the sharp inhale when someone rolls a 1, the louder groan when someone rolls 3 of them in a row, the fake smiles, the real insults. It's a theatre all its own. And just when you think the die have claimed all the attention, a bard, you're pretty sure he's a bard, though he may also be a stable boy in disguise, climbs onto the nearest bench and declares he's got a story so true the king himself would swear on it. You prepare for nonsense. You get a love story involving a knight, a dragon, a goose, and a stolen set of armour made entirely out of fish scales. You also get the ending line, and that's why I never eat eels in June. No one questions it. They just raise their cups and shout, "To the goose!" You raise yours too, because honestly, why not? The night rolls on, the tales get taller, the drink gets warmer, the floor feels a bit closer to your face than it did an hour ago, and you realise you've stopped thinking about what time it is, or what sensory. You're here, in this wooden, smoky, chaotic corner of medieval life, where stories are currency, and strangers become friends until sunrise. And whether or not you remember every word tomorrow, one thing is certain. The tavern remembers you. It's been a while since you stepped through that heavy wooden door, and by now you've become part of the background hump, the rhythm of boots thumping on floorboards, mugs clinking together in sloppy celebration, and a half-drunk choir singing a song that definitely doesn't have real lyrics. You're not sure whether it's the ale or the charm of the place, but your shoulders are finally relaxed, your guard dropped just enough to let the tavern soak into your bones. That's when you feel the stare. You look up slowly, casually, like you're just admiring the low-hanging beams that look like they'd concuss someone taller than 5'8". And there he is, the tavern keeper, arms crossed, back against the far wall. Not doing anything, just watching. His beard is thick, going grey, and looks like it's been brushed exactly never. His apron is stained with what might be ale, stew, or the shattered dreams of patrons past. His eyes, though, those eyes are sharp, calculating, like a man who's seen every lie under the sun and can tell what kind of person you are just by how you hold a mug. He doesn't blink, doesn't smile, just nods once and walks back behind the plank-turned bar, disappearing into the shadows, like a bear returning to its den. You exhale quietly. There's a pecking order here, and you've just been evaluated, judged, weighed, and apparently not found wanting. Tavern keepers in the medieval world were more than just glorified bartenders. They were arbiters of conflict, secret keepers, bailiffs in disguise, and, more often than not, informants. You think you're just drinking ale, but he's cataloguing everything. And while we're on the topic, here's a mainstream historical nugget. Many tavern keepers were required by local authorities to keep a sort of guest book, particularly in cities. Not for custom satisfaction, mind you, for surveillance. Authorities wanted to know who was travelling, who was sleeping where, and whether any strangers might be up to political mischief or spreading the plague. Your mug is empty now, and you consider whether it's worth risking another. That hooded man from earlier hasn't re-emerged. The woman with the ferret is asleep, face down in a corner booth, and the group of dice players are now arguing loudly over whether someone cheated, or if the dice themselves are cursed. Again, you push your mug toward the edge of the table. Within seconds, the tavern keeper's son, or possibly just a nimble orphan with good balance, appears to refill it. You offer a grateful nod. He says nothing, just blinks at you with eyes that have definitely seen someone get slapped with a turnip. You notice the barkeep watching again, only briefly, like a hawk checking in on a particularly suspicious squirrel. You smile. He doesn't return it. It's not personal. It's protection. Here's a fringe historical fact for you. In some regions, Tavern keepers were actually held legally responsible for crimes that happened in their establishments. That's right. If someone got stabbed, the keeper could be fined. If someone died mysteriously, the keeper might have to pay for the burial. So yes, he watches. And yes, he remembers faces. Back at your table, Thomas has fallen into a sort of tipsy reverie. He's tracing the grain in the wood with his finger, like it contains the secrets of the universe. Occasionally he mutters things like, "A goat should never wear boots," and "They never did find the other wheel." You nod politely, unsure whether to laugh or take notes. The fire crackles louder now as someone adds a fresh log. A burst of warmth hits your face. Across the room, the tavern keeper speaks for the first time in what feels like an hour. Not loudly, not with a shout, just a firm, steady voice. That's enough. It cuts through the noise like a knife through boiled cabbage. The dice players freeze. One of them, a scrawny man with a lip scar and a smile that doesn't reach his eyes, stands halfway, clearly thinking about making this interesting. Then he looks at the barkeep, really looks, and sits back down. A low mutter moves through the crowd, but nobody challenges it. The tavern keeper goes back to cleaning a mug, though you notice it's the same one he's been wiping since you got here. He's making a point. This is his house, his rules. And just like that, the tavern returns to its previous tempo, buzzing, slightly chaotic but not boiling over. You get the sense that, if it ever did, the tavern keeper has ways of restoring order, probably with the help of the enormous iron skillet hanging behind the bar. It's never been used for cooking. You can tell. Some scholars still debate whether medieval taverns were genuinely dangerous, or if modern portrayals exaggerate the threat. While there were occasional brawls, stabbings, or illicit dealings, most taverns operated more like public living rooms. Chaotic, yes, but also oddly protective. Think of them like a medieval mother goose, loud, smelly, slightly violent, but fiercely territorial. And the tavern keeper? He's not just the boss. He's the goose. He's also the man who knows where the town sheriff drinks, who's on the run, who's cheating on their spouse, and where the best black market spices are stored. If knowledge is power, he's the medieval version of a CAA director, only with more spit in his beard. You make eye contact with him again, just for a second. This time, he gives you the tiniest twitch of a smile, a fractional acknowledgement, as if to say, "You're all right, for now." It's strangely comforting. He turns away, shouting something to the kitchen that sounds like, "No more stew," unless it stops moving, and disappears through a doorway draped with a curtain of old fabric scraps. You sit back, exhale, and for the first time tonight, you feel rooted. Like this table, this moment, this strange intersection of song, smoke, and questionable stew is exactly where you're supposed to be. A man passes you on his way out. He reeks of horse and chimney ash. He gives you a nod that feels like a blessing and mutters, "He let you stay. That's good." You think about asking what he means, but he's already gone. Instead, you look around again, at the laughter, at the dancing, at the woman with 3 mugs in front of her and a tiny lute she hasn't yet played, at the dogs sleeping by the fire, one of them twitching in a dream, possibly chasing ghost chickens. And you realise, this tavern, smoky, grimy, alive, is more than just a place to drink. And it's run by a man who sees everything, says little, and keeps the whole thing from collapsing under its own drunken weight. You raise your mug in his direction, even if he's not watching. Because if anyone deserves a toast tonight, it's him. You're not entirely sure how long it's been since you first sat down. There are no clocks on the walls here, and your modern sense of time is slipping away like warmth from an untended fire. But one thing is clear now. Your stomach is rumbling in that low, dangerous way that says, either feed me, or I'll make this real embarrassing for both of us. You glance around the room. People are chewing, loudly, sloppily, enthusiastically. Platters are being passed, trenchers are being scraped clean, and there's a consistent background symphony of chewing, slurping, burping, and the occasional hiccuped apology. It's time. Food. You raise your hand awkwardly, catching the attention of the boy who refilled your drink earlier, the one who might be an orphan, or a ghost, or both. He appears at your side like a shadow in a tavern-themed horror story. Food? You ask, tapping the table lightly. He nods and disappears without a word. 10 minutes later, he's back. In his hands, a wide, shallow wooden bowl, steaming slightly and sloshing ominously with what might technically be classified as stew. He sets it in front of you with a thunk, followed by a slab of bread that looks and feels like it's been used in self-defense more than once. And then he's gone again, like smoke between fingers. You lean over the bowl, inhale cautiously, and immediately regret it. The scent is confusing. A little meat, a lot of boiled root vegetables, and something murky you can't quite identify. If hope had a smell in the 14th century, this wouldn't be it. Still, you pick up the spoon, flat, slightly chipped and probably shared by 5 other people tonight, and dip it in. The stew fights back. It clings. It stretches. It's part soup, part medieval memory foam. You lift a mouthful to your lips. It tastes like salt, thyme, and boiled indecision. And yet, somehow, it's not the worst thing you've eaten. Welcome to medieval tavern food. Now, here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. Food in medieval taverns was rarely fancy. Most patrons were peasants, labourers or travellers, not noblemen expecting goose glazed in honey and stuffed with rosemary. The average meal? Pottage? A thick, syrupy mix of grains, water and whatever vegetables or meat scraps were available. Could be barley-based, oat-based, or just plain despair-based depending on the day and the cook's mood. Tonight, your bowl includes what looks like a chunk of carrot, a stringy bit of something you hope is pork, and... wait, is that a bone? Yes. Yes, it is. You push it gently to the side of the bowl, like a shipwreck survivor sending off a message in a bottle. And now the bread. You pick it up. It's heavy, dense, blackened at the edges. Possibly made last week. Possibly made by mistake. You knock it lightly on the table and half expect it to echo. Here's a strange but true tidbit. Bread in medieval times came in different grades. The rich ate white bread, finely sifted and soft. The poor got the brown stuff, made with coarse rye, millet or barley. It was filling but tough and sometimes laced with dirt, sand or other stretching agents. Some loaves were even baked with ground peas and beans just to make the flour last longer. You bite into yours. It fights back. You chew and chew. It tastes earthy, smoky, with a texture that suggests building material more than side dish. Still it goes down. Barely. You look up and see Thomas across the table, already halfway through his bowl of stew, using his bread to mop at the liquid like a pro. He looks at your untouched crust and grins. "Not bad, eh?" he says, mouthful. "Last week they served something green. Nobody knew what it was. We called it the lump." You smile weakly and keep chewing. A woman passes your table, balancing 3 bowls of stew on a wide wooden board. One of the bowls tips slightly, sloshing over her sleeve. She doesn't even flinch, just flicks the sleeve toward the hearth and keeps walking. At a table behind you, a group of labourers are arguing over whether the stew tastes better with a splash of ale poured in. One of them insists it brings out the sheep. Another says it kills the fleas. You're not sure if he means in the stew or in his gut. Now, here's a debated historical point. Scholars still argue whether medieval food was really as bland and unappetizing as we're often told. Some say the use of herbs, onions, garlic, and even exotic spices like cinnamon and cloves suggests a more flavorful diet, especially in wealthier areas or during festivals. Others argue that most meals were dominated by monotony and necessity, not creativity. You? You're currently eating something that tastes like the inside of a boot soaked in broth, so you're leaning toward Team Bland. You take another bite anyway, because hunger. And strangely, your body starts to adjust. The stew is warm. It fills you. The bread gives your jaw something to do. And after a few bites, your brain stops demanding flavour and just accepts what it's getting as sustenance. You glance around. Others are doing the same. Eating, quietly, thoughtfully. This part of the tavern experience is less raucous, more grounded. A temporary truce between man and meal. Then someone shouts, "More salt?" A loud chorus follows. "Yay, salt!" The tavern keeper appears from the back, holding up a small clay bowl like it's made of gold. Salt, expensive, imported, and worth its weight in trouble. He ladles out tiny pinches to those who ask, with all the grace of a stingy wizard bestowing blessings. You manage to get some. You add it to your stew. It helps. Barely. Then comes dessert. Just kidding. There is no dessert. If you want something sweet in a tavern like this, you'd better hope for a raisin in your bread or a particularly sugary onion. Fruit is for the rich. Honey is rare. And if someone offers you a candied anything in a place like this, you should ask if they stole it from a bishop. Still, someone near the hearth is chewing a dried fig like it's made of velvet. You look at him with the quiet envy of a man who's just discovered his last piece of bread was hiding a splinter. The meal ends not with a bang, but with a burp. People begin leaning back, mugs are refilled, and conversation drifts again into gossip, song, and exaggerated tales of battles that probably never happened. You too lean back. The bowl is mostly empty now. The bread is half eaten. Your stomach is making fewer threats. It's a win. Sort of. But here's what you've really learned tonight. Medieval tavern food was less about taste and more about survival. It warmed you, filled you, and bought you a little more time in a world where time was rarely on your side. And in this loud, smelly living room of strangers turned companions, you now know what it means to sit with them, chew with them, and quite literally digest the culture. Tomorrow, you may remember the music. You might remember the stories. But tonight, you'll remember this stew. Forever. There's a lull after the meal, a brief and precious silence in the tavern, where the soundscape dips below deafening. The fire crackles gently. Mugs are clinked, but not slammed. People loosen their belts, lean back against the walls or slump over tables, caught between digestion and drowsiness. Even the dogs seem to sigh in unison. And then someone shouts, "Dice or ditties, friends?" The room stirs awake. You blink as a young man leaps onto the nearest table like it's a stage, arms stretched wide, cheeks flushed with ale and confidence. "I've got bones in my pouch and songs in my lungs. Who's in?" A cheer rises from the crowd, half genuine, half fueled by the universal law that nothing fills a stomach faster than chaos. The young man whips out a small leather cup and a set of carved bone dice, slapping them onto the table with dramatic flair. He gestures toward the bar, where someone's already laying bets in pebbles, pins, and one very confused-looking turnip. A new performance is beginning, and you're sitting front row. Welcome to the evening's entertainment. Dice games, off-key ditties, and just enough danger to keep your senses sharp. The dice game begins with a clatter. A circle forms. Players lean in, eyes glittering with greed or bravado. The rules? Unclear. There's no instruction manual. Just fast hands, quicker accusations, and occasional howls of joy or despair. You don't join in. Not yet. But you watch, closely. The dice themselves are fascinating. Carved from animal bone, smoothed by countless throws, with numbers sometimes replaced by strange symbols. One die has a tiny cross instead of a 6. Another has a crude drawing of a devil. You're not sure if that's good luck or a warning. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dice games were incredibly popular in medieval Europe, across all classes. Known as hazard, or simply the bones, these games were often banned by the church and various kings, who saw them as sinful distractions. But that didn't stop anyone. Gambling was like gravity, always pulling people in, no matter the rules against it. And fringe fact? In some towns, loaded dice were so common that a travelling dice inspector might accompany royal officials to make sure gambling was on the up and up. Though, ironically, many of those inspectors were bribed themselves. You notice it now. One player palms the dice just a moment too long. Another coughs loudly each time it's his turn to roll. Subtle signals, hidden arrangements, all alliances forged with nods and broken with glares. The woman with the ferret, who is now very awake and wearing a little knitted scarf, somehow saunters up to the game, drops a shiny button on the table and says, "Double or I sing." They double. She sings anyway. And oh, what a song. It begins as a lullaby, soft, slow, like warm wind through tall grass, and then takes a sharp turn into a bawdy tale about a monk. The entire room joins in by the second verse. Someone beats on a jug like a drum. Another shakes a pouch of dry peas for rhythm. A lute appears, wildly out of tune, and no one seems to care. The tavern becomes a single, breathing creature, one mouth, one voice, laughing its way through a scandalous chorus. You sing too. You don't know the words, but neither does the man next to you, and he's belting it like he's auditioning for the Pope. So you follow his lead, half singing, half laughing, your voice lost in the din, but your heart beating right in rhythm with the room. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. There's a tap on your shoulder. You turn. It's a man with ink-stained fingers and a slight limp. He wears a feather in his hat, and a grin like he just remembered a joke he's not allowed to say in public. "Want to try a game?" he asks, pulling out a tiny board marked with odd shapes and tiny figures carved from walnut. The board game is unfamiliar. Some mix between chess and checkers, with strange rules involving bishops, boats, and a rule called the sheep's right, which you're almost certain is made up on the spot. But people gather to watch. They cheer your good moves. They groan when you lose a piece. One man offers unsolicited commentary in a language that sounds entirely fictional. It's fun. Confusing, but fun. Here's your scholarly debate for this section. Some historians argue that taverns were too chaotic for structured games like chess or Nine Men's Morris, claiming they were more suited to quiet homes and noble courts. Others point to archaeological digs that have uncovered game pieces in the refuse pits of roadside inns, suggesting these games were a common form of mental escape for all classes. You believe it now, because here you are, holding a pawn shaped like a goose, pretending to understand the rules of sheep's right, and smiling like an idiot. A new cheer erupts from the dice table. Someone's just won big. Coins clatter, accusations fly, a mug is thrown. Accidentally they claim, and the tavern keeper's voice booms from behind the bar. One more cup gets broken. You're drinking from your boots. Laughter follows, but the tension dips again, just a bit. The line between fun and fistfight is razor thin here, and everyone knows it. You feel a shift at your side. It's Thomas. He leans in, eyes half-lidded, voice low. "Careful when you play," he murmurs. "Some games end with a knife, not a laugh." You nod. You believe him. Because now you notice the man in the corner, still, silent, hood low, watching the games without smiling. He's not here for fun. He's here for something else. Maybe debts. Maybe, just boredom and a sharp blade. Danger and joy live side by side in this place, you realise, like siblings who share a room but never stop fighting. But then, just as tension prickles the air, a juggler steps into the centre of the room. Where he came from, nobody knows. 1 second the space was empty, the next it's filled with spinning tankards, tossed apples, and one surprisingly aerodynamic shoe. The tavern erupts in delight. He juggles while walking a crooked line down the centre of the room, occasionally ducking under flying food or catching an errant coin thrown in applause. And just like that, danger fades again, replaced by awe, by playfulness, by something very close to joy. You lean back, the laughter warm in your ears, and think, this is what the church was afraid of. Because this place, this rickety, smelly, unpredictable tavern, is full of people finding freedom. For a few coins and a few hours, they're forgetting their back-breaking work, their lords, their debts, their cold homes. They're laughing. And that's dangerous. Powerful, anyway. You finish your drink. You consider singing. You definitely consider watching more dice games. But mostly you just sit and soak in this moment, this strange, wonderful chaos of games and songs and stories, knowing full well it could all turn upside down in a heartbeat. And knowing just as surely, you wouldn't miss this for anything. The candles are burning lower now. You notice it when the corners of the room darken, the flickering light no longer reaching the rafters. The shadows stretch longer, and the smoke thickens in the air like a fog that doesn't want to go home. People are slouching, voices are slower, and the energy has softened into something quiet. You realize you're tired. And not just, it's been a long day, tired. You're tavern tired. The kind that settles in your bones, makes your eyelids feel like parchment soaked in ale, and turns every bench into a tempting bed. It's time to figure out where you're sleeping. You stand, slightly dizzy, and wave down the barkeep's boy, who somehow hasn't aged or blinked since your first interaction. He appears silently, as always, and simply tilts his head toward a narrow, dark staircase beside the hearth. No words, just that small gesture. Apparently, that's the only direction you're going to get. You nod your thanks and shuffle toward the stairs. And here we go. The first thing you notice as you climb is that the steps aren't level. Some are taller than others, some slope downward in ways that defy both logic and physics. One creaks under your weight, with the enthusiasm of a soul trying to escape the wood. It smells worse the higher you go. You can't quite describe it. It's part mildew, part feet, and part history. The kind of history that no one wrote down because they were too busy trying not to breathe through their nose. At the top of the stairs is a door, a single, heavy, swollen plank with a piece of twine for a handle. You tug it open. It sticks for a second, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe because something once died behind it. Then it gives way with a groan. You step inside. The sleeping quarters of a medieval tavern. You were hoping for something, not luxurious of course, but maybe vaguely human. Instead you get what appears to be an attic stuffed with straw, mystery stains, and one extremely judgmental cat perched on a beam overhead. There are no beds. Just pallets. Stacks of flattened straw, some wrapped in old linen, some bare. A few have blankets, or what once qualified as blankets before they were repurposed as moth buffets. You step carefully, boots crunching on something that's hopefully just hay. You pick a spot. Not the one with the cat overhead. Definitely not the one near the bucket. You settle in near a wall where the draft seems least aggressive and lower yourself down onto a pile of straw with all the grace of someone pretending this is fine. You lie back. You stare up at the slanted wooden ceiling, beams overhead forming a crooked skeleton. The wood groans with every step someone takes downstairs. You hear muffled laughter below, the occasional clink of glass, and a crash that nobody reacts to. It's oddly comforting. But then the itching starts. It begins small, a little tickle on your ankle, then your wrist, then the back of your neck. You sit up quickly and inspect the blanket. Yep, bed bugs. Not just bed bugs, possibly noble bed bugs. They've been here longer than the tavern keeper, possibly older than the building itself. They move like they pay rent. One of them even waves. You sigh, scratch, settle back down, and mentally prepare for a night of mild suffering and full-body twitches. Welcome to medieval lodging. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most travellers didn't expect comfort when renting a night's sleep in a tavern. They were lucky to get a roof, a blanket, and not have to share with livestock. In fact, shared lodging was the norm. You weren't booking your own cozy room. You were thrown in with whoever else needed a place to rest, often strangers, often drunk, occasionally missing teeth and slash or moral restraint. And that leads us to the sound. The snoring. Oh, the snoring. One man in the corner sounds like he's inhaling entire cabbages through his nose. Another is wheezing like a bellows caught in a mousetrap. Someone across the room lets out a high-pitched whistle every time they exhale, like a badly tuned flute. It's a chorus of bodily confusion. You sit up again. Across the room, you see a figure curled up in a wool cloak, holding a staff. A pilgrim, maybe. Their eyes are closed, but they're muttering in Latin. You'd worry, except they're clearly not awake. Maybe dreaming about relics or taxes. In the opposite corner, someone mumbles a lullaby. It's soft, sweet, and just a little off-key. They trail off midway through the second verse and sigh like their soul's tired. The wind rattles the shutters. The cat on the beam meows once, judgingly, and disappears into the rafters. And just when you think you might drift off, the door opens again. A new guest stumbles in, dragging a pack and looking like they've been personally insulted by the road itself. Their face is red, one boot is missing, and they smell like boiled cabbage and betrayal. They grunt, trip over the pilgrim, mutter something rude, and collapse right next to you. Wait. Now you have a bunkmate. He's asleep within seconds. And he snores. Of course he snores. You pull the blanket over your head, half for warmth, half for survival, and breathe shallowly through your mouth. It doesn't help. The smell of old sweat, damp straw, and wet dog clings to everything like it's been painted on. You try to sleep. You fail. You turn over. Now your hip is poking into something sharp. A rock? A beetle? The hardened regrets of 100 other travellers? You don't know. You shift again, try to think peaceful thoughts. And that's when someone across the room farts. Loudly, triumphantly, followed by the words, "You're welcome." You bury your face in the blanket and scream silently. Here's a fringe historical tidbit. Some medieval taverns actually offered communal sleep areas, not just to save space, but to provide a sense of security. Safety in numbers. If someone tried to rob you, or worse, you at least had witnesses. Unfortunately, those witnesses might be snoring, drunk, or actively participating in the crime. There's also scholarly debate about how widespread private rooms really were. Some argue that wealthier inns in cities had individual chambers, complete with feather beds and chamber pots. Others insist that even the fancy spots were just slightly cleaner piles of straw with less aggressive rodents. You wouldn't know the difference right now, because your straw mattress is poking your ribs, your blanket smells like old socks, and the man next to you just rolled over and accidentally slapped your shoulder. You consider going back downstairs, but then you hear it. The fire crackling below. The soft, rhythmic lull of mugs being set aside. The muted notes of one last song, sung low and slow by someone who's forgotten most of the lyrics. It's calming. You adjust your blanket. Tuck your arms close. Close your eyes. And somehow, miraculously, you begin to drift. Because even with the bugs, the smells and the bodily noises that would make a battlefield blush, there's peace here. A strange, smelly peace. And as the wind outside whistles through the gaps in the wood, and the tavern creaks around you like an old ship in a storm, you realise you might actually sleep. You sleep, sort of. Not the gentle, dream-filled kind of sleep you get in a quiet bed with fresh linen and a lavender sachet under your pillow. No, this is more like defensive sleeping. You slip in and out of consciousness between snores, strange thuds from downstairs, someone repeatedly mumbling, "I buried the cheese," and the unfortunate reality that every few minutes you have to swat a flea off your ankle. Still, somehow, your body finds a rhythm. Your muscles unclench, your jaw slackens. And even though you're curled up on something that feels like hay and regret, your brain waves settle just enough to take a break from medieval madness. Until the preacher starts talking. You don't notice it at first. His voice folds itself into your dream like a background chant. But soon it pushes to the front, insistent, theatrical, dramatic in the way only half-drunk holy men can be. Repent, for the fleas know your secrets. You snap awake. You sit up fast enough to alarm the man sleeping beside you, who lets out a confused grunt and rolls over, taking most of your blanket with him. The preacher is pacing now, barefoot, wild-eyed and holding a wooden cross like he's about to smack a demon in the face with it. His robes are stained, his beard is magnificent, and his voice has the gravelly edge of someone who both fears and deeply enjoys hellfire. 3 nights I walked through the valley of shadows, he shouts, and on the 4th, I found a tavern with stew so unholy, it spoke Latin backward. Someone groans from the corner. Brother Willard, sit down. But Brother Willard will not sit down. He continues pacing, muttering about sins, stew, serpents, and something called the heretical goat, which sounds like either a metaphor or a very specific insult. You lie back and stare at the ceiling again, wondering if this is your punishment for biting into the stew bone earlier. But then, like a shift in the wind, another voice joins in, slurred, low, full of gravel and something close to joy. Don't listen to the preacher, it says. He once tried to exorcise a sausage. You turn your head. There, in the opposite corner of the room, half in shadow and half tangled in a sheepskin cloak, is a knight, or what's left of one. His armour is dented, his tunic is patched, and he appears to have only one boot. The other foot is wrapped in what looks like a curtain. He has no teeth. None. Not even one. But his grin is magnificent. He sits up slowly, joints creaking like rusty hinges, and winks at you. First time in a tavern? He asks. You nod. He chuckles, a sound like gravel being stirred in a bucket. You'll remember it for the rest of your life, he says, which, depending on your choices tonight, might be shorter than expected. He cackles at his own joke and pulls a flask from somewhere inside his cloak. He takes a long swig, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and belches in a way that could qualify as a warning signal. Then he leans back and stares at the ceiling. You stare, too. Because really, what else is there to do? Name Sir Aldrich, he mumbles. Used to be someone important, now I'm someone else. You don't know how to respond to that, so you just offer your name in return. Or at least, the name you've been using since you got here. It's safer not to be too honest. Aldrich nods like he respects the lie. He pats the floor beside him. Come sit. Better draft over here. Less snoring. You drag your palate over and join him. He hands you the flask without asking. You take a sip. It burns, it bites, and it tastes like someone pickled a bad decision in moonlight. But it's warm, and oddly comforting. Used to sleep on rocks, he says. When I was a squire, before I earned my armour, then I got armour, slept standing up for 5 years. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Okay, 4, but I meant 5. There's a pause, and then he asks, what do you make of the preacher? You glance over. Brother Willard is now sitting in the corner, whispering fervently to his cross and gently stroking the wall, like it's trying to confess something. I think he's losing an argument with the wall, you reply. Aldrich laughs again, this time louder. It echoes through the rafters, making the cat above you hiss in disapproval. Preachers always lose, he says. Walls never listen. Here's your mainstream history moment. Travelling preachers were common in medieval Europe, especially during periods of upheaval or plague. Many were self-declared prophets, often illiterate but charismatic, wandering from town to town with fire and brimstone sermons and a talent for stirring up guilt. They were both loved and feared. And here's your fringe fact. Some taverns welcome them specifically to entertain or even distract guests. A travelling preacher could keep a room engaged just as effectively as a bard or juggler, especially if he yelled enough to drown out the thunder of drunk disputes. Aldrich shifts his weight, groaning as his joints pop. "Do you believe him?" you ask. He shrugs. "I believe in stew, and I believe that wine goes better with silence." You smile. The two of you sit like that for a while, shoulder to shoulder, watching the ceiling beams like they're stars. Downstairs the fire crackles. A floorboard creaks. Somewhere below, someone starts to sing again. Slow, soft and slur. A lullaby. You recognise the tune from earlier. And against all odds, it calms you. Sir Aldrich passes you the flask again. You wave it off. "You'll fit in fine," he says. "You listen more than you speak. That's rare here." He doesn't ask your story. Doesn't pry. He just leans back, wraps his arms around his chest, and begins snoring almost instantly. The kind of snore that rattles in cycles like a bellows with ambitions. You lie back down on your pallet. The preacher has quieted. The snoring has blended into white noise. The cat is gone. The man beside you is probably dreaming of dragons or giant wheels of cheese. And for once you think maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep too. Because in this room of strangers, weirdos, saints and fallen knights, you've found something close to peace. Not comfort, not quiet, but presence. And that, in a medieval tavern, that's more than most can ask for. You wake up the way you might imagine a medieval peasant wakes up, slowly, with confusion, discomfort, and the distinct feeling that you've aged several decades overnight. Your back aches, your neck feels like it lost a bar fight, and your mouth? It tastes like it's been chewing on an old boot stuffed with mouldy straw. A rooster crows in the distance. Of course, there's a rooster. You sit up, immediately hitting your head on a low-hanging beam. You mutter something incoherent, which the beam ignores because, like everything else in this tavern, it has absolutely no sympathy. The room is a mess. Bodies everywhere. People draped over benches, curled in corners, sprawled on pallets in ways that suggest their spines gave up long ago. Someone is snoring directly onto the floorboards. Someone else is mumbling about fish taxes. Sir Aldrich is somehow upside down in a pile of cloaks and smiling in his sleep. You stand. You immediately regret it. Your legs are stiff, your feet are cold, and your head feels like it's hosting a parade, where every float is a bad decision. You stagger toward the stairs and descend, each step creaking like it's tattling on your existence. The main room of the tavern is quieter now. Dim morning light filters in through the cracks in the shutters. The fire has burned low, just a few embers glow like tired eyes. A few people are awake, moving slowly, carefully, like survivors after a particularly rowdy festival. Someone is sweeping the floor half-heartedly with a broom made of sticks and fury. You head toward the bar. A mug of water is placed in front of you before you even say a word. It's cloudy. You don't ask questions. You sip. It tastes like minerals, dust, and maybe a hint of last night's stew. But it helps. Now comes the hard part, locating the chamber pot and navigating it. There's no gentle way to say this. The medieval approach to toilets was not glamorous. Indoor plumbing? A fantasy. You stumble out the side door and into the rear courtyard, following the trail of unfortunate smells and a sign with a vaguely ominous arrow. The chamber pot area is technically a row of buckets hidden behind a flimsy wooden partition. It's not private. It's not clean. It's not even really functional. But it exists. And in this era, that's good enough. You do what you need to do. You return inside, slightly traumatized. Back in the tavern, someone's already attempting to serve breakfast. You're not sure who gave them permission, but here they are, slopping ladlefuls of what looks like yesterday's stew, watered down and now with added oats, into wooden bowls. There's also bread, or more accurately, bread's grumpy cousin, crust that lost its soul. You accept the bowl with a quiet nod. The tavern keeper appears behind the bar, looking suspiciously fresh-faced for someone who probably hasn't slept. He gives you a quick look, a slow nod, and then goes back to pouring something thick into a jug for a hungover man who appears to be negotiating with the table about whether he should vomit now or later. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Morning routines in medieval taverns were rarely organised. Most places didn't have scheduled checkout times or structured breakfast menus. People just filtered out when they were ready or when they could walk again. Some inns and taverns did offer breakfast to overnight guests, but it was basic: ale, bread, and perhaps a bit of cheese or pottage if you were lucky. You sit at your usual table and dip the crust into the gruel. It softens, slightly, enough to be chewable without fear of dental destruction. Someone plops down next to you. It's Brother Willard. His hair is wild, his eyes are bloodshot. He's holding a half-eaten turnip. "God spoke to me in a dream," he says solemnly. He said, "Eat less garlic." You nod. Wise advice. Willard sighs. I'm ignoring it, of course, and takes a huge bite of the turnip. Across the room, Sir Aldrich staggers downstairs wearing a different boot on each foot and humming what might be a war chant or a lullaby. He slaps a few coins on the bar and mutters, "One drink for my headache, and one for the memory of whoever stole my real boots." He sees you and nods. You survived. Good. You're one of us now. You're not sure what that means, but it feels like a compliment. Around you, the tavern comes back to life. Slowly, carefully. People greet each other with groans and raised eyebrows. A man and woman argue about whether they were married before or after the third mug of wine. A chicken appears from nowhere, hops onto a bench, and steals a piece of bread before vanishing again like a feathered phantom. And then, of course, the crash happens. Someone in the corner, trying to balance a tray of mugs and breakfast slop, stumbles. Everything goes flying. A bowl shatters. A mug rolls under a table. A sharp, collective inhale fills the room. Everyone freezes. The tavern keeper looks up, stares. Then, quietly, he says, "One more, and it's your head next time." Everyone exhales. Back to normal. The tension lifts. And here's your fringe historical tidbit. Some taverns had strict rules about conduct, posted clearly for patrons or whispered firmly by the barkeep. Breaking cups, fighting, or knocking over the fire could lead to fines, forced labour, or being banned entirely. In fact, some medieval laws required taverns to maintain a level of order or risk losing their operating rights. That's right, if your guests got too rowdy, the authorities could shut your business down. Hence the barkeep's no-nonsense tone. You finish your meal, which is generous wording, and lean back. Outside, the town is waking up. You can hear hooves clopping on cobblestone, a market crier shouting something about fish, someone nearby arguing about the price of onions. And inside, the tavern breathes. You've seen it wild, crowded, loud, alive. Now you're seeing it tired, quiet, human. The laughter is softer. The songs have stopped. The tables are being wiped with cloths that look like they've lived 5 different lives. The bartender's boy, "You're not ready to leave." Not yet. So you sit. Breathe. You think about last night, about the games, the songs, the strange characters, and even stranger smells, and realize something. It was real. So weird, but real. And in a world filled with uncertainty and cold roads, that's worth everything. Sir Aldrich appears again, slumping into the bench across from you. He holds up a mug of something warm and cloudy. "Cheers to the morning," he says. You clink mugs. It's terrible, but it's tradition. It's mid-morning now, or close to it. Light streams in through the warped shutters, painting strange golden stripes across the stained tables and smoke-slained walls. The tavern has calmed into its version of normal. A low hum of voices, the occasional bark of laughter, and the rhythmic clatter of bowls being stacked, mugs being wiped, and one perpetually angry chicken scratching at the floor like it's hunting for lost treasure. You're still seated at the same table, though now you've been joined by a rotating cast of new faces. Travellers, locals, people who drift in like dust through a cracked door and slide into a seat without ever really looking at you directly. They just nod, like they know you've paid your dues, like you've survived your first night and earned the right to keep sitting here. And then, just as your eyelids start to droop again, you hear it, the hiss of whispered gossip. It slinks across the room like smoke, low voices, sharp edges, punctuated by knowing glances and the occasional theatrical gasp. You lean in a little. You can't help it. Look. Eavesdropping is practically a civic duty in places like this. 3 women at the next table are deep in conversation. They look like tradeswomen, aprons dusted with flour and ash, fingernails lined with soot, hands that clearly know hard work. One of them gestures with a spoon, stabbing it in the air for emphasis. "I'm telling you," she says, "it wasn't the pig that went missing. It was the pig and the vicar's boots. Same night." The second woman nods sagely. Probably the same thief. Pigs are clever, you know. The third, younger, snorts into her mug. Or the vicar's lying about both. You smile to yourself. Welcome to the gossip hour. And in a medieval tavern, gossip is currency. People talk because they can't not talk. It's how they pass the time, process their world, make sense of the chaos. It's also how they keep tabs on each other and on the folks who aren't around to defend themselves. You hear snippets from other tables. Said he saw the baker's boy sneaking out of the priest's cellar. They found bones near the well, but not that kind of bones, just chicken. And then she said, "That's not my baby. That's a turnip with hair on it." You try not to laugh. You fail. Here's your mainstream history tidbit. Taverns were more than watering holes. They were the heartbeat of local communication. With no newspapers, no bulletin boards, and very few people who could read, verbal storytelling and gossip became the primary methods of sharing information. Royal decrees, plague warnings, battle rumours, harvest news, everything spread over mugs of ale and suspicious stew. And unlike official announcements from the town crier or the church pulpit, tavern talk was uncensored. It was messy, biased, entertaining, and often more accurate than you'd expect. You sip from your mug, half listening, half daydreaming. Across the room, Brother Willard is arguing theology with the broom. Sir Aldrich is asleep on a bench with his mouth open and a spoon balanced on his forehead. The cat is back, curled in a sunbeam, smug as ever. And then, just when things feel like they've settled into a peaceful lull, the door bangs open. Hard. Conversation stops. Even the broom seems to flinch. A man enters, cloaked, muddy, with a posture that screams, "I'm not here to make friends." His boots are wet. His eyes scan the room like he's counting sins. A sword hangs from his hip, dull but clearly sharpened just often enough to keep people guessing. The sheriff. You just know. He doesn't announce himself. Doesn't have to. He walks like someone who's used to being obeyed. Like someone who's had to pull a body out of a well before breakfast and still had time to break up a fight by noon. He goes straight to the bar. The tavern keeper doesn't flinch. They speak in low tones, too low to hear, but whatever is said makes the tavern keeper's brow furrow. Then the sheriff turns around. His voice is calm, measured. "I'm looking for a man, about ye-high." He holds his hand to chest level. Dark hair, talks too much, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. A long silence. You shift in your seat. Not because it's you, but because this kind of moment feels dangerous. No one answers. Someone coughs. Someone else sips loudly. Then, from the back of the room, an old woman cackles. "Sounds like my first husband. You can have him." Laughter bubbles through the tavern, cautious at first, then louder. The sheriff doesn't laugh. He nods once and adds, "You see him? Tell him he's got until sundown." Then I stop asking. He turns, walks out, and closes the door behind him with a soft click. And just like that, the room breathes again. Gossip explodes. People lean in. Voices rise. One man says, "I knew it. I knew it was Jorik." Another swears it's the tailor's cousin. Someone else claims it was never a man at all, but a woman in disguise who is definitely stealing pigs for a cult. Here's a fringe historical tidbit. Local sheriffs and bailiffs often made tavern rounds in real life. These weren't modern police officers, but rather tax enforcers, law collectors, and occasionally power-hungry bullies with a badge. And many of them did use taverns as information-gathering hubs, sometimes official, sometimes under the table. Rewards were offered, threats were whispered, and fugitives were caught because someone got too drunk to keep quiet. You sit back and take it all in. This isn't just a tavern. It's a living bulletin board, a drama stage, a courtroom, and a confession booth rolled into one. You think about the sheriff's target. Is he hiding in plain sight? Did you pass him on the stairs? Is it the guy playing with his soup, like it's full of secrets? Or is it the tavern keeper himself? A fun little theory to chew on as you finish your drink. Someone slides into the seat beside you. It's the woman with the ferret. She sets a small pouch on the table with a quiet thud. 5 copper says it's the miller, she whispers. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Man's got guilt in his beard. You can smell it. You don't bet. But she does. She waves the tavern keeper over, whispers something and hands him the pouch. He pockets it, doesn't blink, and walks away. That's when you realise the gossip doesn't just entertain here. It moves money. And it condemns. One word too many in the wrong ear could change someone's fate. Or your own. The tavern returns to its chatter. Games resume, mugs clink. The sheriff's shadow fades like a bad dream. But the tension? Still there. Hiding under the floorboards. Lurking in glances. Waiting for the sun to dip low enough for truth, or trouble, to show its face. And you? You sit quietly. Observing. Wondering what other secrets this tavern holds. And how many more you'll hear before sundown. You stay seated, motionless for a while, mug in hand. The wood beneath your fingers gone warm from your grip, and the heat of the sun streaming in through the cracked shutters. The tavern is loud again, but not too loud. The kind of noise that hums rather than hammers. And beneath it all, there's a new energy, subtle, like a tremor before a landslide. The sheriff's visit did more than stir up gossip. It tilted the room, shifted everyone a few inches off centre. People now talk with one eye open. They laugh, but a little too quickly. They share tales, but their voices drop near the ends of sentences. You start to listen differently. And the stories that seemed silly just hours ago, about stolen pigs, mysterious boots, and disappearing vicars, start to feel like something else entirely. Like clues. And right in the middle of it all, the tavern keeper moves silently, wiping down the bar with that same tattered cloth that by now surely contains its own family tree. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't speak unless spoken to. But he watches, always watching. You get up and stretch, not too conspicuously, just enough to justify wandering around a little. You wander past a few tables nodding at familiar faces. You pass Brother Willard, who's deep in a game of Guess the Sin with 2 very nervous-looking stable hands. You pass Sir Aldrich, who's having a passionate argument with a chair he's named Henry. Eventually you make your way to the far corner of the tavern. The quiet corner. It's always there in places like this, where the windows are tight shut, where the shadows are thicker, and where the people sitting don't want to be noticed, but definitely notice you. A pair of men are playing a game with sticks and pebbles on the table. They glance at you. not unkindly, but with a flicker of assessment. Behind them, a woman with a veil pulled low over her face nurses a drink and watches the door. You sit nearby. You don't interrupt. You just... And sure enough, the conversation eventually resumes. Low voices, careful words. One of the men says, "He was here 2 nights ago, sat right where you're sitting." The other replies, "Didn't pay." Of course he didn't, but he left something. A pause. Then, you think the sheriff's really looking for him, or is this another distraction? Another grunt. Don't matter, they always find someone. You pretend to study a knot in the wood of your table. And in that moment, you understand something about medieval justice. It's not about guilt or innocence. It's about who runs fast enough, or who the town decides can be sacrificed to buy a little peace. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Law enforcement in medieval towns was a patchwork of power. Sheriffs, reeves, bailiffs, constables. They all had overlapping duties, most of which revolved around taxes, land disputes, and maintaining order. But order often meant giving the appearance of resolution. If a crime was committed, someone needed to pay. It didn't always matter who. You're jolted from your thoughts by a loud bang near the hearth. A chair falls over. A man stumbles back, hand on his cheek, glaring at the woman who just slapped him hard enough to knock the lice out of his hair. "You said you were a noble," she screams. "I am," he replies, indignant, holding up a coin as proof. She grabs the coin, bites it, spits on it, and throws it into the fire. The room howls with laughter. The man retreats to the bar, wounded in pride more than flesh. The woman sits down again, straightens her apron, and says to no one in particular, "That's the 3rd fake noble this week. I swear, this place needs a bouncer." And just like that, the tension shifts again. Back to laughter. Back to normal. You finish the dregs of your drink and push the mug aside. Then you hear it. A voice. Faint, tired, but cutting through the din like a whisper aimed directly at your ear. "I know where he went." You turn, slowly. It's the veiled woman. She hasn't moved, hasn't looked at you, but her fingers tap gently on the table in a rhythm that says, "Listen." "You didn't ask," she murmurs, "but I'll tell you anyway." You lean closer. "Down by the river," she says. "Old fishery. Nobody goes there now. Too many rats. Too many memories." She takes a sip from her cup. "If the sheriff wants him, that's where to look. But tell him this. If he finds him, he won't like what he finds." You start to ask what she means, but she stands abruptly and walks away. Gone before you can find the words. You sit there, unsure whether to believe her, unsure whether you even want to be part of this story anymore. Because that's the thing about taverns, they pull you in. First as a guest, then as a participant. And then, before you know it, you're a witness. Maybe even a suspect. Here's your scholarly debate for this section. Historians still argue over the role of taverns in political dissent and underground movements. Some believe they were breeding grounds for rebellion, where revolutionary ideas took root over mugs of ale and whispered promises. Others claim that's romantic nonsense and taverns were more concerned with stew consistency than sedition. Truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. Back at your table, the world keeps spinning. A bard sings a slow ballad about a sailor who married a ghost. Someone starts juggling spoons, and fails. Someone else announces that their goat just gave birth to twins, and that everyone should buy a drink in celebration. And yet, beneath it all, you feel that undercurrent again. Not fear, exactly. Just an anticipation. Like something's about to happen. You don't know whether it's the sheriff returning, the man from the river walking through the door, or the tavern keeper deciding today's the day he stops tolerating fools. But you feel it. And you realise you're no longer just watching the story. You're in it. The sun outside is high now, judging by the light sneaking in through the warped shutters and the way it hits the floor in a golden pool that the cat has immediately claimed. Dust dances in the beams, making everything feel a little slower, a little hazier, like the tavern itself is yawning after a long, chaotic night. You lean back at your table, the wooden bench creaking beneath you, and let the voices of the room blur into background noise again. It's not silence. This place doesn't do silence, but there's a certain rhythm now. The tavern has entered what you might call its midday lull, that sacred window where even the rowdiest patrons nurse their hangovers instead of stoking them. The tavern keeper wipes down a table near the hearth, dragging a stool with one hand while balancing 3 mugs in the other. He moves with the kind of effortless precision that only comes from muscle memory and a total lack of surprise. You'd trust him to carry a baby and a barrel at the same time without spilling either. You notice he pauses at the door, listens, just for a second, then goes back to work without a word. It's subtle, but now you're paying attention. You glance at the main entrance. No new visitors, no sheriff, just the sunlit quiet of a sleepy street outside and the muffled sound of a cart creaking by. Back at the bar, the regulars begin to shift. You see it now, the ones who've been here longer than you, the lifers, the ones who probably haven't left town in years but know more about it than any official ever will. They sit in the same spots, their mugs get filled without a word. They don't ask questions, but they notice everything. And you realise something strange. They're watching you. Not all at once, not obviously, but in that casual, half-lidded, one eye on the new guy kind of way. You're no longer invisible. You're part of the tavern's memory now. You've spent a night here, eaten the stew, shared the stories, endured the fleas. That makes you someone worth noting. And in a place where trust is earned 1 mug at a time, that's saying something. A man approaches your table. You recognise him. He was in the background last night, laughing too loudly, spilling more drink than he swallowed. But now he's quiet, serious. His shirt is cleaner than you remember, his belt buckle polished. He sits down without asking. "Mind a word?" he says, fingers tapping the table in a nervous rhythm. You shrug. "Go ahead." He leans forward. "I know what you heard earlier, about the river, the fishery." You blink. "I didn't say anything." "Just don't need to," he interrupts. "Just don't go. All right? Doesn't concern you." He leans back, folds his arms, stares at you for a beat, then stands up. And walks away. Just like that. No threats, no explanation. Just a warning dropped like a pebble in your drink. And now you really want to go. That's the thing about warnings in places like this. They don't push you away, they pull you in. Like the tavern itself is daring you to dig deeper, poke where you shouldn't, and see what floats to the surface. You're interrupted by a laugh from across the room. Brother Willard, back from his theological debate with the broom, has now cornered a group of travelling musicians and is challenging them to a holy music off, whatever that means. He holds a lyre upside down, claims it a blessed harp, and strums it with the confidence of someone who's never played a note in his life. The musicians humour him for a few seconds. Then one of them, a young man with a lute slung casually over his back, steps forward. He plucks a few warm notes, gentle and slow, and begins to sing. The room hushes. It's not a loud song, not one of the bawdy, ridiculous ones from last night. This one is softer, older, a tune about a lost village, a ruined love, and a silver bell that rang only once before it sank beneath the sea. People lean in. Even the cat pauses its bath. The lute hums like it's whispering to the walls. The singer's voice is smooth, rich, almost too clean for a place like this. You'd believe him if he said he'd trained in a cathedral, or subdued the daughter of a duke just to learn one chord. When the song ends, there's no applause. Just silence. and then the tavern breathes again. But not quite the same. Everyone seems a little softer now, a little closer, like that one song reminded them they're all just people, trying to get through the mud of life with as few blisters as possible. Sir Aldrich raises his mug in a quiet toast. "To the bell," he murmurs. A few others echo him. "To the bell." You raise your mug too, though you don't fully understand. It doesn't matter. You're in it now, deep. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Music was a central part of life in medieval taverns. It wasn't background noise, it was communication. A bard could share news, stir emotions, retell history, or start a fight, depending on what tune they chose. And unlike the formal music of the church or noble courts, tavern music was earthy, raw, and often improvised. It belonged to the people. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some towns had laws restricting what could be sung in public places. Certain songs were considered dangerous, too political, too racy, or too inciting. Singing the wrong tune could get you fined, or worse. Back at your table, the singer has packed away his lute. He accepts a drink from a grateful patron and slips into a booth with the ease of someone who's done this 100 times. A few coins change hands discreetly, a gesture of thanks, or perhaps payment for a message delivered in melody. You start to realize everything here is layered. The drink, the talk, the songs, the silences. They all mean something. Even the joke about the vicar's pig might not be a joke. And that woman from earlier, the one who warned you about the river? She hasn't come back. The tavern keeper walks by your table and pauses just long enough to say, "Best not to chase shadows, especially when they're headed toward water." He moves on. And suddenly, you're not just in a tavern anymore. You're in a story. One where people lie through laughter, where truth is hidden in music, and where everyone knows more than they're telling. You sit back. Watch the room. Feel its pulse. And wonder, what happens next? By the time the sun begins its lazy descent toward the western horizon, the tavern has begun to stir again. Not in a sleepy, yawning sort of way, but in that low, anticipatory way you see just before a storm. Voices get louder, eyes sharper. The laughter carries an edge, as if everyone knows something is about to happen, even if they don't know what. You've been sitting in the same spot for hours now, and yet it feels like time has both stopped and sprinted past you. There's something about this place, a strange magic stitched into the smoke-stained rafters, into the uneven floorboards and the tankards worn smooth by countless desperate hands. You look out the small window near your table. The light filtering in is amber now, thick and warm and heavy with the dust of the day. Shadows stretch long across the tavern floor, and that cat, that same smug, unbothered feline, has relocated once again to claim the sandbeam as her personal throne. The woman with the ferret has vanished. The veiled stranger hasn't returned. And no one's talking about the sheriff anymore. Which is exactly why you know they're all thinking about him. That's the thing about gossip. It burns hot, then hides. But it doesn't disappear. You glance over to the hearth. The fire is being stoked again, its crackle rising like a voice waking from a nap. Mugs are filling faster now. Conversations are speeding up. And somewhere behind it all, the tavern keeper's silence is louder than ever. He hasn't spoken to you since that cryptic warning about chasing shadows. He looks at you differently now. Not like a stranger. Not quite like a friend. More like a witness. Someone who's seen too much to go back to innocence. And he's right. You have. Because this isn't just about ale and stew. It's about something bigger. Something underneath. You don't even realize you're holding your breath until someone drops into the seat beside you with the subtlety of a stone through stained glass. You turn, startled. It's a boy. No more than 15, barefoot, freckled. His clothes are patched in 12 places and still not enough. He's breathing hard like he ran here. He leans in close. Are you the one asking about the fishery? You freeze. You didn't ask, not directly, but people see more than you say in a place like this. You nod slowly. He glances around, swallows hard, then speaks so quietly you barely hear him. He's gone. Left last night, before the sheriff came. Said he'd only wait until moonrise. You want to ask who he's talking about? You want to ask what this even has to do with you. But you don't. Because if you've learned one thing here, it's this. The more questions you ask, the more dangerous you look. And right now, everyone's already looking. The boy continues. He left something. Told me to give it to someone who seemed out of place. He fumbles in his tunic and pulls out a folded piece of parchment. He sets it on the table in front of you like it's a bomb he doesn't want to explain. Then he stands and disappears into the crowd. You stare at the parchment. Unfold it. There's a single sentence written in rough charcoal script. If they find me, make sure they find the truth, not just someone to blame. There's no name, no signature, no map. Just those words. You fold it again, tuck it into your sleeve. You don't know why. You don't know what you're supposed to do with it. But you do know this. The game has shifted. Again. The sheriff will return. You know it. Everyone knows it. And when he does, someone's going to be named, pointed at, dragged out by the collar and made into an example. Because this town doesn't need justice. It needs closure. Here's your mainstream history fact. Medieval justice systems were often performative. Trials weren't always about evidence. They were about appeasing the community, satisfying the crown, or proving the church's moral authority. Confessions were prized, even if coerced. Public punishments were more common than private justice. And the truth? It was a luxury. And your fringe fact? In some taverns, the local gossip grapevine held more sway than any sheriff. People disappeared, blame shifted, and sometimes scapegoats were chosen not because they were guilty, but because they were convenient. You sip what's left of your ale. It's gone warm. But you barely notice, because now you're watching everything. Every motion, every glance, every drink poured and every hand hovering too long near a dagger. And in all that watching, you notice something odd. The bard, the one who sang that haunting song earlier, is packing up. Not just his loot. All of it. His cloak, his bag, a worn scroll case tied with twine. He's leaving. You stand slowly, walk over. Heavy out, you ask. He looks up, eyes unreadable. Storm's coming, he says. You glance out the window. The sky is gold, still, calm. I don't see one. He smiles. Not kindly. Exactly. He slings his bag over his shoulder and walks toward the door. Turns and says, "Some people survive storms by leaving before the rain starts. Yeah. Others just get wet." Then he steps outside and is gone. You return to your table. Sit down. The parchment feels heavier in your sleeve now. You think about the sheriff. The warning. Offery. The man who fled. The man who stayed. You look around the tavern, at the faces, the stories, the secrets held in mugs and murmurs. And you understand something new. This place, this smoky, creaky, stew-stained tavern, isn't just a place to drink and forget. It's a crossroads. A stage. Trap. And you walked into the middle of the play. You're not just watching anymore. You're part of the script. The last light of day filters weakly through the tavern's grimy windows. casting long shadows that crawl across the walls like tired ghosts. The day's hustle and tension have worn thin, replaced by the soft buzz of whispered conversations and the clinking of mugs filled one last time. Outside, the streets grow quiet. The marketplace shutters close, horses stamp in their stalls, and the distant cries of children and dogs fade to a hush. You sit back at your table, the folded parchment still tucked safely in your sleeve, its weight oddly comforting now. You feel the hum of the tavern settle around you like a blanket. A ragged, smelly but oddly warm comfort. This place has become a strange kind of home in the last day, despite the fleas, the bedbugs, the stew, and the occasional threat of a blade. The tavern keeper stands behind the bar, quieter now, observing the room with tired eyes. He offers you a small nod as you catch his gaze. No words needed. You know this is the final act of the day, and you're both aware that tomorrow will bring fresh stories, new secrets, and maybe, just maybe, some answers. Around you, the familiar faces have softened. The woman with the ferret is here again, quietly stroking her companion as she murmurs to the shadows. Sir Aldrich lounges in the corner, looking less like a fallen knight and more like a man who's just accepted his place in this smoky theatre. Brother Willard, surprisingly subdued, leans against the wall, his lips moving in silent prayer or perhaps rehearsing his next fiery sermon. The fire crackles low, sending warm flickers of orange and gold across the room. The dogs sleep peacefully at the hearth's edge, and the cat curls once more into her sunbeam throne, eyes slowly closing. You breathe deeply. The air smells of smoke, old wood, and something faintly sweet, perhaps a remnant of last night's ale or the faintest trace of the tavern's hidden stories. It's time to slow down, to listen, to let the noise of the day fade into the comforting silence of shared space. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the tavern without you, the steady rhythm of its life pulsing beneath the surface, the laughter, the tears, the secrets whispered in the dark corners, the songs sung loud and soft, the games played with dice and hearts, the people who come and go like tides, leaving traces as ephemeral as smoke. And then you open your eyes. You feel a hand on your shoulder. It's light, gentle, familiar. You turn. It's the tavern keeper. No words, no. Just a nod. An unspoken agreement. You belong here now. For all its chaos, its grime, and its strange rituals, this place is alive. And so are you. You stand slowly, feeling the ache in your limbs and the warmth in your chest. You walk to the door, pausing to take one last look back at the tavern. The smoke-stained walls, the crooked tables, the glowing hearth, the people who call this place their refuge, their crossroads, their story. You step outside. The night air is cool, crisp. You take a deep breath. The stars twinkle above, cold and distant. But down here, in this muddy, messy, utterly human corner of the world, something brighter glows. You smile, because you survived. You lived. You became part of the tale. And as you walk away, the faint sound of a lute drifts behind you, singing a song of a lost village, a silver bell, and the hope that, even in the darkest places, light can find a way. You carry that light with you now, in your heart, in your bones, in every weary, wonderful step. The night is quiet now. Our world is still, and it's okay to drift, to breathe, to rest, because the tavern and its stories will be waiting for you when you wake. And so will your next adventure. Good night. Sweet dreams.